You want to call me Florida?
Yeah!
Hey!
Yeah! Barbados!
Hey!
Barbados!
In 1960, my grandparents on my dad's side migrated to England from Barbados. They didn't know each other prior to coming over here, and they met during work. Growing up, I was always very aware and in touch with my Bayesian roots. I once visited when I was 2 years old, and I must have absorbed some information unconsciously. But honestly, I could have been in Weston-super-Mare. I have no recollection of it. I'm a man, and I've revisited it after 31 years. I'm preparing for the 9.5-hour flight, and I'm going to get to see Barbados in all its beauty. Barbados is known for rest and relaxation, but for me, it was about seeing my roots and the everyday culture. I managed to stay in 7 different houses across the island. I travelled by bus mainly to take it all in. I wanted to give a really big thank you to all of my family for everything they did and for reminding me that I will always have a place out there. I'm very proud of all of them, my mum and my dad's side. Visiting, I can't help but feel privileged, and in 2 ways. Firstly, being born a cis straight male in a first world country with all my faculties and able-bodied. And secondly, to have this distant place filled with family members who want to see me. And I think it's crazy that 5 generations ago, my family was slaves. 2 generations ago, we had no power and outdoor toilets and living in shed houses. And now I'm here, high, drinking good Colombian coffee, making YouTube videos. I never thought I would be travelling to 2 different continents in the same year. If you would attach all 4 long-haul flights I took in 2023, you would have travelled further or roughly the same distance as the equator, at 24,000 miles. Now, I bring this up not to flex, but rather to show the absurdity of life. So you better believe your boy brought some Camus to read on the beach. Barbados is split into 11 parishes. I tried making it my mission to visit every single parish and spend some time in each one. I only managed to get to 6. I stayed in 5 parishes and they all had their own kind of charm. I would say being coastal is quite important, so I think St. Thomas and St. George being landlocked is a bit of a shame. However, next time I'm out there, I'll be sure to visit them. Christchurch and St. James are the most tourist-filled spots. St. James in the north is where you'll find a lot more seclusion around the hotels, and it's where a lot of the wealthier travellers will go. My uncle informed me that along this part can be known as the Gold Coast. I really enjoyed my time in St. Philip, staying with my family and visiting Foul Bay. St. Philip is a fairly quiet parish with mainly residential buildings. I did find it one of the prettiest ones too, and it might be in part due to the family connection, but I thought it had a mellow vibe with a variety of houses. Now, there isn't a polite way to say this, but Barbados can be quite poor and have quite a lot of poor areas, so it's common to see quite a vast big stone or brick house next to a small chattel wooden house. And what is especially unique about this is the different colours, the shapes and the textures that the houses all have. And they're all set at different heights and not quite lined up. So the chattel houses, I will come back to this as well. Along the east coast, or the Atlantic Ocean side of the island, you have St. John, St. Joseph and St. Andrew. All have a lot more of a countryside vibe. And the island has a way to go regarding civilian infrastructure, but I found that bus stops and the like became less frequent in the countryside. Also streetlights too. But I will say I really did enjoy the remoteness of it. It gave me a lot more of a vibe like that. St. Michael is the parish that contains the capital, which would be Bridgetown. And most of St. Michael is Bridgetown, but it also spills into Christchurch and St. George slightly. A lot more dense with buildings and population too. The tallest building is the Tom Adams Financial Centre, and it is operated by Barbados Central Bank, and it is 164 foot. And for some perspective, the Burj Khalifa is 2,716 feet. So, not many tall buildings. It leaves a lot of the sky open for show. And the sun rains down heavily and majestically too. The final two parishes are St. Lucy and St. Peter in the north. I wasn't able to visit St. Lucy, but I did get up to St. Peter quite a bit to visit Speightstown, which I definitely had to make a stop there or two because, as you can see, this is where the Bristol bar is. So of course I found my way there. But I didn't actually have a drink in there. I wasn't really drinking that much. But anyway, I say I wasn't drinking that much. I did spend one night. I had a nice Airbnb with a jacuzzi booked, and I opted to stay at the family's for a birthday party and got liquored up. And oh, good Lord, it was an un-airconned room. I was hungover. Oh my God, never again. That's what I can say. Never again. Oh, I did not give up this next room the next night. Look at that, 16. Oh. English is the language of the island, which always helps when travelling, but Bayesian is what is broadly spoken. It incorporates English and West African. There is a rhythm to it and a pitch too, which luckily I would say is not like trying to get grips with the Vietnamese pitch and the tones with that. But I was often asking people to repeat themselves, and if I was asking Roselle what someone said, she was like, psh, you know what I mean? So there is still a bridge, or rather there's still a bit of a ravine to jump. It of course sounds different on different parts of the island, so there's regional dialects. And the other thing to note is quite typically you will see Barbadian instead of the word Bayesian, or hear it in more formal settings as well. Even though the vast majority of people would identify themselves as Bayesian. I'm going to mention the sun, the heat, and the humidity. I should have arguably started with this. Barbados is a very hot country. If you wasn't aware that the Caribbean is hot, then let this be the video to. If you leave one thing from this video, let me tell you something. It's fucking hot, man. Okay, I'm going back to script as well. I can instantly feel the difference in the video. Anyway, stop breaking the fourth wall. I'm getting back to it. The food is banging, and it was everything that I'd hoped for and more. My grandma is still the best chef I've ever known, and being out there, I could taste the influence that her home country gave her. One of my highlights was buying these red snappers from the fisherman who had recently just got back and had sat up on the roadside. They had come back from their day's work and it couldn't have been more fresh. He cleaned it up for me and I had cooked it within the hour, leaving me astonished at how good it was. Talking about farm to plate right here, you know. He cleaned it up perfectly and I watched them, so the next time I could give it a go myself. Now, I gotta say, when I went to go and prepare it and make it, I was too high and hungry to kind of worry about the aesthetic beauty of making this plate look incredible. So it's just like cucumbers and rice, baby. Fish, of course, is big on the island, and it is part of the national dish, which is flying fish and cuckoo. Flying fish don't fly per se, but they launch out of the water and glide away from predators, and it is quite fascinating to see. How cuckoo is okra and cornmeal turned, which you might know as polenta. I guess that might be an easiest way to describe it, but they have very different textures. You turn the cornmeal with the okra and the slime until it's reached the desired consistency, and then you serve it with the gravy. Another saying that I found while I was there was, "We eat the cuckoo for the sake of the sauce." And another highlight was the cooking lesson given to me by one of my family members, and I also learnt about sorrel, aka Roselle. I know, it was meant to be. And also I learnt a bit about the cassava root, a food that's been a staple on the island for thousands of years. Next up is souse, which is a pork dish with pickle, potatoes and salad. Growing up exclusively, I only ever seen the pig trotters being used, but now it seems to be different parts of the animal. There are a lot of signs around the island, so if you did want to order some souse, you can place your order with the chef and go and pick it up. Fish cakes are these lovely fried dough balls with salted fish inside of them. I could eat hundreds of them as a child, and depending on where you get them, they can be quite spicy too. I really like the attention that this sign draws to the female leadership of Barbados as well. I think it's a really top-notch sign. Other fish that are eaten on the island are dolphin, but it's actually mahi-mahi. You have swordfish, some kingfish, snappers, and tuna. Whilst I'm on the topic, Oistins Fish Fridays are a weekly event where people go down to Oistins in Christchurch and they set up markets to eat. It's definitely somewhere to visit if you're visiting Barbados. And it's frequented not just by tourists, by locals too. Other honourable foods to mention have to be bakes, which is similar to pancakes but firmer. Conkeys, which is another cornmeal dish but it's quite sweet. But I didn't have either of those things. You also have salt buns and cutters, which is like a ham sandwich or a roll. And then, of course, macaroni pie, a cheesy, dense pasta side. Or if you eat enough of it, I guess you could make it your main. Barbados has its own version of KFC, and it's called chevettes. They do a KFC as well, though. You can get a nice roti from here, but there's also a variety of other places where you can get this great roti too. They have this really amazing aesthetic of a McDonald's in the 90s. I found myself sitting in there and just taking in the environment on kind of a nostalgic level. There are restaurants, but what I liked more were the bar and grills or the bar and kitchens, serving really good hearty portions of rice and meat and variations of. I kept returning for the ribs, honestly. One of the consequences of COVID was lots of folk in the food industry lost their jobs, so it led to them turning their houses into eateries. So I would be walking around places and discover little restaurants or little kitchens that aren't quite on Google Maps yet. I haven't mentioned the food cost. Now, of course, it is an island economy, so imported goods are very pricey. I think the most I spent on a single thing was £6 on a bottle of water. It was £5 for a block of butter and £1.50 for a Mars bar. Eating at Oistins on Fish Fridays can be quite pricey. I paid £25 for fish and rice. Now, I'm also a very privileged traveller from a wealthy country, so I was a bit taken aback. So I can't imagine how the locals are doing it. And I wanted to put more emphasis on people on the island than people travelling there, because it's one thing to travel somewhere and think it's expensive, but imagine living where you are and thinking it's expensive. It's expensive in England for us, right? So yeah, kind of scale that even more, I'd say. The bakeries are wonderful. I do highly recommend as well. I usually avoid gluten, so in my breakfast, I'll normally skip the pastries, but yeah, I couldn't do it here. But most of my time I was spent in Airbnb, so I was doing my own breakfast. And so something I have to mention, and I should have maybe even started with it, was rum is the choice of drink on the island. Four Squares, Cockspur, Mount Gay, these are some of the distilleries, and I have family that work for the Four Square factory as well. I got to do a rum tasting. The ESA Fields White Rum and the Old Brigand are the two leaders, the Eternal Saviour and Friend, and the One-Eyed Man, for those in the know. Banks and Deputy are the local beers, and if you can find 3 for $8, you are winning, so definitely grab some. The licensing laws are very different. I remember getting into Bridgetown for like 8 a.m. and there was a sports bar full of people, and I was just a bit like, "Oi, bruv, you got a license for that?" This kind of shows the biggest disparity of houses. I couldn't even see the whole house over the wall. And then just across the road is a lot more humble beginnings. I will briefly touch upon the beaches, but I have a separate video dedicated to the beaches of Barbados, so please check it out. The thing with Barbados beaches is they're just like too perfect, you know? If all that amazing sand, clear, warm water and perfect temperature. Yeah. Infrastructure is something that's always being improved, but there are bumps. One example was the power cut out to the island, and that happened the day before I left. So no aircon and no Wi-Fi. It's totally tough. But again, I think back to the locals that have food stored in their freezers, fighting against time. Also, all the businesses without backup generators stop working. So everything becomes a kind of living museum. And I didn't realise at first why no one was trading. I went into 4 different stores. Everyone was kind of stood still and wasn't doing anything. And it was such a shame. And I think it took about 12 hours and it came back on in parts. Yeah, the sun was beaming. And to frame it in context of the island, when I walked 2 miles from Bridgetown to my family, everyone went really quiet. They said you need to be really careful, the heat is very unforgiving. And it's very true. If you've ever been by a bus vent when it blows the warm air on you, it's kind of like that constantly. There's no escape. And what is remarkable is the sun sets at 6 p.m. pretty much every day. And I don't know why, but I didn't expect it for some reason. I thought it'd be the opposite. I thought it'd be really late. And as I previously mentioned, parts of the island lack streetlights, so it's common to travel with a flashlight when you're venturing around late. But again, walking on roadsides at nighttime is very, very dangerous. And of course, I would be amiss if I didn't mention Rihanna. Of course, after rum, I believe she's the biggest export of the island. Now, I wasn't able to film her. This is me coming out of her private house now. This is her pool. I wasn't able to get any shots of her. She said, like, legally speaking, I wasn't allowed to put them online. But yeah, she greets everyone to the island personally when you arrive on the airport. I did walk as much as possible. I had a really big sun hat. I would carry water with me, do not too long of a journey, like a couple of hours tops and such like that. Be prepared. But I did really love travelling around by bus. It was one hell of an experience. I think I kind of preferred it, especially to taxis, being that the taxi fares are very expensive. So travelling by taxi through 2 parishes, it would cost $60, whilst the bus or the minivans are a standard £3.50 anywhere. So if you got a taxi from the furthest point of the island to the other, to like 2 furthest points, it would be $150, right? Which is about £170. You have 2 different kinds of buses. You have the new government electric buses, and then you got the old buses. But you also have these minivans, and they run the same routes as the buses. The minivans are a private enterprise, and it's very highly competitive. So the driver's mates will be leaning out of the window shouting for customers and trying to pick you up. But you can also hail a bus the same way you would a taxi. So there is definitely an advantage to kind of hanging out the window and trying to grab people. The old buses and the minivans in particular are quite a tough ride. No suspension, high speed, potholed roads, no AC, super cramped, banging the loudest music possible. They will stop to buy drinks on the roadside and block traffic constantly. But man, did I love travelling by them. Another situation when I was told when I told certain family members that I was travelling by the minibuses, they was quite shocked. And it was like, oh yeah, you need to have the exact right money for the buses as well. The minivans will change you up, but the government buses, you need the exact money. If you are a driver and you're renting a car, I couldn't recommend a 4x4 anymore. The bad roads, but also there's no ceiling with how bright the headlights can be on a car. So if you do it, or if you don't do it, and there's a lot of 4x4s, the lights are positioned perfectly to come into the windscreen. So if you are on a 4x4, you kind of match it. It's kind of the only way to battle against it. Just wanted to show how loud the crickets were, and it reminded me so much of the cicadas in Thailand. On the Bob Marley situation, I can't say too much for 2 reasons. Obviously, it's illegal. If the police see you with it, especially as a tourist, there'll be a shakedown. Secondly, I don't want this video to get age restricted. Is a lot more about Barbados than just spoken, let's say. I owe it to anyone that is a Bob Marley appreciator. The only thing I'll say is, this is a tip anywhere you go. If you wear Bob Marley merchandise and go places, it's a good signal. So sometimes it's better when people find you. Here's a giant sand crab I managed to capture. I think it's my most impressive photo, I do believe. It was lovely to be around animals. So I'm a city boy. So like, I'm lucky if I get to see foxes, let alone livestock, and then let alone wild animals. Now my search for monkeys lasted me the whole time I was there. Now, I've seen them twice, like the back of their heads and the pack running away. But unfortunately, I didn't get to see them. But the locals tell a different story about monkeys, about these little shits that come in your house and steal your stuff. So they have a different appreciation. Again, from the outside in, I just think, yay, monkey. But like, it's not as fun as they seem. They are technically pests. I believe, I shouldn't say this without verifying, but I think you can, I think there was a time where you can kill them at least. I don't think you can anymore. But yeah, I have to double check that. Okay, so I just double checked, and yes, you can. It's state mandated. You can kill them. There was a notion of trying to increase the bounty on killing them as well. I totally get it. When they're destroying livelihoods and personal lives, something has to be done. I totally get it. I can't just be like, from the tourism point of view, oh, it's a pretty monkey, you gotta keep it. I do have a massive disconnect between our plate and where the meat is coming from. And I guess in Barbados it doesn't happen. So I'm around family that are farmers and are raising livestock. So I get to see it, and you know exactly where it's going to go. But I still think you can appreciate life and eat meat, and there is a balance to be had. Little geckos are cute. But what's not cute are the 40-leggers. In polite company, you do not mention them. And it's kind of like a Voldemort. You don't, some bad juju. Do not say their name. Trust me, brother. Another dish I absolutely love is crab. And getting to see wild crabs next to me while I was on the beach was definitely, again, it breaks down this barrier between food and the animal that I never really got to experience. These things are super cute. It's awfully tragic that they taste so good as well. But obviously, I wasn't just catching the crabs on the beach and cooking them up. But I was told by family members, if you do, it's a good way to go fishing and you use those as bait. And I really did like feeding these little birds some pastry. Now, they don't have eyelids, so they kind of look mischievous at all times. It's kind of odd. But yeah, it's a very cartoon style feeding these birds. So BYS or Buys holds the record for the nicest place to be up at. I mean, quite clearly. You know, I don't think that could be touched. I did manage to find some other pieces of graffiti. I was too lazy to go and get some cans and do it myself. I do regret it, I must say. But it was lovely to see the little gems when I did find it. I couldn't think of a more fitting way than to end the video with some graffiti and with some coffee. Now, I later found out that Barbados had one roastery, so I should have grabbed some beans to come back with as well. My dad brought some pre-ground coffee back, but obviously I turned my nose up that quite quickly. When I look back going, this is how I normally wake up and have my coffee at 6 o'clock in the morning. I at least have a Barbados flag shot glass in the background in comparison to this pristine, blue-skied, absolute wonderland. Cost of the flights are looking about 500 to 1,000, and a week in an Airbnb, you're looking at like 300 as your floor, maybe a bit lower, and then upwards depending on how privileged you would like to travel. There are no shots or vaccine required to travel, but I got absolutely nyammed off at the beaches by sandflies and other little beasts of burden. So be sure to pack yourself some insect repellent and, of course, sunscreen, just like Baz Luhrmann says, always wear sunscreen. I said this in the beaches video, but there are no private beaches. Also, it's visa-free travel for most countries. And also, it's mostly English speaking.
You had expected the last thing you were here. When you last time? The time when I got the car for you all. Yeah, you remember that? You were smaller than that, and then you came. Come up here, you better watch it. Look at Stanley soon.
But yeah, thank you so much for watching the video. Like and subscribe. I've also got a Thailand video. If you made it this far through and into the end of it, I would say you probably appreciate the Thailand one as well. But yeah, thank you very much for your time. You're all legends.